A man called Peter Jones, who lives outside Washington, D.C. over in America, came across a bunch of old letters that had been passed down in his family and had survived throughout the years. And they were written by to his great-great-grandfather by some of the family back here in Ireland. And gives you a real sense of the loss and the separation they felt, the ones who had emigrated. Something like only 1 in 10 that went out to America in those years ever made it back to Ireland again.
We're used to the myths, the rebels, the drinking, the fighting Irish. But Kilkelly, Ireland is different because it isn't a legend and it isn't poetry. It is a song built entirely from a stack of real letters sent from a father in County Mayo to a son in America he would never see again. In this video, we're going to talk about those letters and explore what life may have been like for the family throughout one of the hardest few years of Irish life. The song Kilkelly, Ireland doesn't begin in the 1800s when the letters were written, but actually in the late 20th century in Bethesda in Maryland. Peter Jones, a songwriter and musician, was giving his parents a hand clearing out the attic when he discovered a wooden box containing a bundle of fragile, yellowing letters. These letters had been preserved for over a century, passed down through the generations of the Jones family, who were descendants of the Hunts. The letters were addressed to Peter's great-grandfather, John Hunt, who had emigrated from Ireland in 1855. As Jones reads through the correspondence, he found himself in possession of a spoken record detailing his ancestors' lives. While John Hunt's life in America was known to the family, he worked on the railroad, married, and raised children. The letters filled in the silence of the life that he left behind. The emotional weight of the letters, particularly the recurring news of deaths that John could not attend, and the aging of his parents he would never see again. This inspired Jones to compose the ballad. What makes this song unique is he did not invent the lyrics. Rather, he versified the prose of the letters, retaining the chronological structure and the specific news mentioned by his great-great-grandfather. Peter Jones, along with his brother Steve Jones, is an American musician. His connection to the material is undeniably deep, which lends the song its authenticity. In interviews, Jones has described the experience of finding the letters as reuniting with the land of his ancestors. The composition itself is simple, typically played in the key of D minor or E minor, utilizing a folk melody that emphasizes the melancholic and repetitive nature of the news. Year after year, letter after letter, the distance still remains.
Kilkelly, Ireland, 1860, my dear and loving son John. Your good friend, schoolmaster Pat McNamara, so good as to write these words down.
The visit to Kilkelly to complete the circle of the song's creation, Peter Jones visited the parish of Kilkelly in later years. He attended evening mass at the Urlar Church and was welcomed by the local community, who had adopted the song as an anthem of their local history. During this visit, he was shown the physical locations mentioned in the letters, including the grave of the schoolmaster who wrote them, Pat McNamara, who we'll talk about soon. John Hunt is the recipient of the letters. Born around 1842, he emigrated in 1855 at the young age of 13. The age is significant here. It places his childhood squarely in the horrors of the Great Famine between 1845 and 1849. He would have witnessed the devastation of his community before being sent away to Maryland in the United States. The letters and family history confirm that he worked on the railroad, likely the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, which was a major employer of Irish labour in the region. We do not have John's letters to Ireland, only the acknowledgements of them from Ireland. We know that he sent money and photographs of his American children. He was a dutiful son who financed the survival of the farm in Mayo, yet he sadly never returned. Brian Hunt was a tenant farmer in the town of Urlar. Crucially, Brian was illiterate. He could not read the letters John sent, nor could he write the replies. He relied entirely on the oral tradition and the assistance of a scribe. His voice in the song is one of stoic sadness, constantly inquiring about John's soul and safety, while relaying the harsh economic realities of the farm. Pat McNamara was the schoolmaster of the local national school, who helped Brian read and write the letters to John. The opening lines of the song immortalize this man. Your good friend, the schoolmaster Pat McNamara, is so good as to write these words down. In a community with low literacy rates, he was the conduit to the outside world. He translated Brian Hunt's spoken Irish or Hiberno English thoughts into formal English. The letters indicate that he was a good friend of John Hunt, likely a childhood peer who stayed behind and obtained an education. Pat McNamara is buried in the cemetery at Urler Abbey. His grave is now a site of interest for those who know the song, representing the pivotal role of the scribe in preserving Irish history. While the song is titled Kilkelly, the Hunt family lived in Urler, a rural town approximately 3 miles from the village of Kilkelly. The dominant landmark is Urler Abbey, a Dominican friary founded in 1430 on the banks of Urler Lake. The abbey was suppressed during the penal laws, but remained a burial ground and a centre of spiritual gravity for the locals. The Hunts lived in the shadow of these ruins. Kilkelly was the postal town. It was where the letters were posted from and where the American letter would arrive. It was essentially the commercial hub where the family would buy the meal and supplies mentioned in the correspondence. The 3-mile journey from Urler to Kilkelly would have been walked or travelled by donkey and cart. The distance is significant when considering the elderly parents. The isolation of Urler by the lake and the abbey emphasises the solitude of the parents left behind. The song is structured into 5 verses, each corresponding to a specific year or period documented in the letters. Kilkelly, Ireland, 1860. My dear and loving son John, your good friend and schoolmaster Pat McNamara was so good as to write these words down. Your brothers have all gone to find work in England. The house is all empty and sad. The crop of potatoes is sorely infected, a third to a half of them bad. While the song says 1860 for rhyming purposes, the letters began in 1858. This is just a decade after the famine. When he says your brothers have all gone to work in England, this refers to the system of migratory labour known as tailyhogan. Small farms in Mayo could not support a full family. Young men travelled to England or Scotland seasonally to harvest crops, sending their wages back to pay the landlord's rent in Ireland. This left the homestead in Urler populated only by the elderly parents and the very young, creating a house all empty and sad, as mentioned in the letters. When the lyrics say the crop of potatoes is sorely infected, this is the most chilling line for a 19th century Irish person. There are a number of contributing factors to the Great Famine, or as I prefer to call it, the Great Hunger, but for the sake of the video we'll just use the Great Famine. But anyway, the Great Famine of the years 1845 to 49 was caused by the Phytophthora infestans, or blight. The blight didn't disappear in 1850 either, it returned periodically. The early 1860s even saw wet weather and renewed partial failures of the crop. For Brian Hunt to report that a third to a half were bad was to report a life or death crisis. It meant that the family would have to buy meal, like corn or oats on credit, driving them deeper into poverty. When the lyrics say don't work on the railroad, John's mother Elizabeth sends a specific warning. The B&O Railroad and others were notoriously dangerous. Irish labourers were often given the most hazardous jobs like blasting or tunnelling because they were likely considered more expendable than enslaved labour in the south or skilled labour in the north. This line humanises the parents' fear. They're terrified that their son has escaped starvation in Ireland only to be crushed in America.
Mother says not to work on the railroad. Be sure to come on home soon.
When we get to the lyrics saying Kilkelly, Ireland, 1870, my dear and loving son John, hello to your missus and to your 4 children. May they grow healthy and strong. Michael has got in a wee bit of trouble. I guess that he will never learn. Because of the dampness, there's no turf to speak of, and now we have nothing to burn. When the lyrics say Michael in a wee bit of trouble, this is a euphemism with heavy political weight. The trouble refers to the Fenian Rising of 1867 and the subsequent agrarian unrest. The Fenians, or the Irish Republican Brotherhood, were active in Mayo, recruiting young men to drill and prepare for an uprising against British rule. The Rising of 1867 failed militarily, but it radicalised a generation. For a young man like Michael, John's brother, to be in trouble likely meant he was suspected by the Royal Irish Constabulary of Fenian membership or agrarian agitation, threatening landlords or agents. The father's comment, I guess that he'll never learn, suggests a mix of parental worry and resignation to the son's rebellious nature. When the lyrics say no turf to speak of, turf, as most of us know, was the sole fuel source. It is cut from the bog in spring and must be dry in the sun to be burnable. The late 1860s and 70s were characterised by unseasonably wet summers. Wet turf will not burn. To face a damp, freezing winter in a stone cottage with nothing to burn was a recipe for respiratory illness and misery. Kilkelly, Ireland, 1880. Dear Michael and John, my sons, I'm sorry to give you the very sad news that your dear old mother has gone. We buried her down at the church in Kilkelly. Your brothers and Bridget were there. You don't have to worry, she died very quickly. Remember her in your prayers. When we get to this verse, it dramatises the arrival of the black-edged letter. For the emigrant, this was the ultimate fear. The mother's death. Elizabeth Hunt passes away. The father, Brian, is now alone or living with children. The structure of the family unit is broken. When the letters say she died very quickly, this phrase appears frequently in emigrant letters. Whether true or not, it was a mercy granted by the scribe to the distant son, trying to prevent the overwhelming guilt of not being there to comfort her. When the lyrics say brothers and Bridget were there, the listing of who attended the funeral highlights who was absent. John and Michael, who seems to have left by this point as well. The inability to attend the wake and funeral was the psychological scar of emigration, known as exile's guilt. Kilkelly, Ireland, 1890. My dear and loving son John, I suppose that I must be close to 80. It's 30 years since you're gone. When the lyrics say 30 years since you're gone, the passage of time is stark here. John left as a boy of 13, now he's a man of 48. The father is close to 80, a remarkable age for that time and place. There's a bit of false hope. The father's hope that Michael will return make haste is palpable. It represents the dream of reunification that rarely materialised.
My dear and loving son John, I suppose that I must be close on 80. It's 30 years since you've gone.
Kilkelly, Ireland, 1892. My dear brother John, I'm sorry that I didn't write sooner to tell you that father is gone. He was living with Bridget. She says he was happy and healthy down to the end. You should have seen him play with the grandchildren of Pat McNamara, your friend. The singer-narrator here changes. Brian Hunt is dead. The letter is now written by one of the brothers. When the lyrics say grandchildren of Pat McNamara, this is a masterful lyrical detail in my opinion. It shows the continuity of life in Urler. The schoolmaster who wrote the letters for 30 years has also aged. His line continues. When the lyrics say he called for you at the end, this is the emotional climax. The revelation that the father died calling the name of his absent son is devastating. It confirms to me that the trauma of separation was just never resolved. When the lyrics say, why don't you think about coming to visit? The song ends with an invitation that just feels hollow. The parents are dead. The home is changed. The visit is now a visit to a grave, not a home. John's departure in 1855 would have been marked by an American wake. Because the journey to America was expensive, dangerous, and usually permanent, the community treated the departure as a death. Neighbours gathered at the Hunt home in Urler. There was food, poaching, music and dancing. However, the atmosphere was more like a funeral. The next morning, the family would walk John to the crossroads or to the train station. This moment of separation is the emotional baseline of the entire song. The letters are the only thread maintaining a connection that was severed at the wake. In the letters, it's all one-sided. We hear the father's voice pleading for a visit. We do not hear John's reply. John likely never returned. Why mightn't he have went back? In 1890, a ticket to Ireland was expensive. John had a wife, he had children in Maryland. To leave his job in the railroad as well might mean losing it. Many immigrants as well also feared returning to the scene of their poverty. They also feared that if they returned, they might be trapped there again. The silence of John Hunt is the silence of millions who chose the future, America, over the past, Ireland, but carried the guilt of that choice forever. I'll put links to a few different versions of the songs in the description, as well as the website where you can read some of these letters. To me, Kilkelly, Ireland is more than a song. It's very unique in how it's written, based off the letters like that. Peter Jones took the private grief of his ancestors and transformed it into a song for the Irish diaspora. It's easy for us to relate to these feelings. The constant worry about parents back home. What if tomorrow I receive bad news? It captures the specific pain of the 19th century Irish experience. Either the necessity of leaving or potentially the tragedy of staying, and the letters that cross the ocean to bridge the gap between the two. It's an absolutely heartbreaking and well-written song. But look, before you go, if you could do me a huge favour and click that like button, it really helps the video out and get discovered by more people on YouTube. Also, if you have a moment to browse through the shop, feel free to have a look. There might be something you like. I still have that 10% discount go until the end of January. I had also failed to mention it on a previous video, but I can also do custom designs too on these products, so anything in particular you would like, feel free to reach out. And as always, a huge shout out to our channel members. Here's your names up on screen now. Thanks so much for your continued support. Absolute legends, as I always say. Thanks a million. If you'd like to join them, click that join button down below, or check out the links in the description for more info. But anyway, that's it for me. Thanks a million for watching, and I hope you all have a great day. Slán go fóill. Cheers.